Hello and welcome to Sleepy Scientist. I'm glad you're here, whether you've had a long day, a busy mind, or you simply love falling asleep to the sound of science. Tonight we're going to wander into a world where stone seems to dream itself into living forms. The air is calm, the light is soft, and as we step quietly into this landscape, you'll notice shapes in the earth that feel oddly familiar, as if the mountains and cliffs have borrowed features from the creatures of our world. Post your location and your local time in the comments. I'd love to see where in the world you're listening from and when. If you enjoy these sleepy explorations, I'd be so grateful if you gave the video a little like and tap that subscribe button. It helps more sleepy scientists like you find their way here, and it means I can keep making more of these journeys for you now. Ahead of you lies the sleeping giant ridge. From a distance, it's unmistakable, the silhouette of a colossal human form stretched out on its back face, turned slightly towards the sky, knees bent just so. The ridge runs for nearly 12 kilometers, and in the fading evening light, the rock's contours deepen into shadows, giving it the depth and weight of a real slumbering giant. You can almost imagine the slow, rumbling breath of someone who's been asleep for centuries. But of course, this giant is not flesh and bone. It is the product of patient geological artistry. Millions of years ago, glaciers crept across this land, their frozen bodies grinding against bedrock with the persistence only ice can manage. They carved valleys, left behind moraines, and scraped away softer layers of sediment, revealing harder rock beneath. Over tens of thousands of years, wind took over the sculpting sanding ridges, rounding slopes, and adding the subtle folds and curves that now form the giant's blanket and limbs. You might ask yourself, why does the human brain so quickly see a person here? Why not simply a ridge? Part of the answer lies in pareidolia, the brain's delightful habit of finding familiar patterns, especially faces and bodies, in the most unexpected places. It's the same phenomenon that makes you see animals in clouds or expressions in the knots of wood. Walking closer, you'll notice the head is made of ancient schist, its crystals catching light in tiny sparkles. Geologists can tell you this rock is over 500 million years old, a witness to oceans long gone and continents that have drifted like slow, silent rafts. The torso is a mix of granite and sandstone, each layer telling a chapter of shifting climates, warm, wet periods when rivers swelled, followed by frigid ages, when ice sealed everything in white. There's a kind of gentleness to this giant. It feels like it's been here forever, yet its features will not stay this way forever. Erosion is constant, even if it is slow. Every rainfall smooths a cheekbone just a little. Every frost season widens a crack along the shoulder. One day in hundreds of thousands of years, the sleeping giant may be unrecognizable. But for now it rests. Imagine for a moment lying down where the giant's feet meet the horizon. Above you, the night sky pours over the ridge like a cosmic blanket. If you stayed long enough, you could watch the stars wheel around its head as if the giant dreams beneath their glow. Would the giant's dreams be of the days when glaciers flowed here, or would it dream of far-off mountains it has never met? The air grows cooler as evening deepens. A few hardy pines cling to the giant's chest, their roots finding cracks and hollows in the stone. In summer, wildflowers sprout along its arms, a scatter of yellow, purple, and white blooms that seem like the embroidery on an ancient garment. In winter, snow smooths over every contour so that the giant looks tucked under a sheet of moonlit silk. And yet, this is not a static sculpture. This is a living process, even if its heartbeat is measured in millennia. Seismic tremors might one day shift the land here. Heavy storms could send parts of the blanket sliding into the valley. Over deep time, every part of the giant will rejoin the cycle of rock, broken down into gravel, carried into rivers, eventually compressed into new stone elsewhere. Still in this moment, the sleeping giant ridge feels eternal. You trace the outline with your eyes, from brow to knee to toes, and it's easy to believe that it's simply resting, waiting for some quiet signal to wake. Perhaps when it does, it will stand and walk across the valley, leaving a new, giant-shaped hollow in the hills. Or perhaps it will simply stretch, roll over, and sleep for another age. You breathe slowly, the same rhythm the giant might keep if it were alive. And somewhere between the rustle of the grass and the whisper of the wind along its face, you feel a little smaller, but also comforted, like you're lying beside a friend who has been here long before you and will be here long after. The wind shifts as you leave the giant's side, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and sun-warmed stone. The path curves, and there rising from the desert floor is the Elephant Rock. Even from several hundred meters away, its shape is startling. You see the sturdy column of its legs, the rounded bulk of its body, and the arching trunk reaching down toward the earth. The resemblance is so complete that you almost expect to hear the soft flap of its ears or the low rumble of its call. The rock itself is a massive arch of red sandstone standing nearly 40 meters high. In the warm light of a late afternoon, the stone glows a deep amber, as though it carries the memory of every sunset it has ever watched. You walk closer, and the texture becomes clearer, layers upon layers of compressed sand, each one laid down millions of years ago, when this land was not a desert at all, but the floor of an ancient seabed. Imagine tiny grains of quartz carried by water, settling gently over centuries until they formed a blanket thick enough to harden into rock. Over time, tectonic forces lifted that seabed into the open air, where wind became the patient sculptor. For tens of thousands of years, sand-laden gusts blasted against this formation, smoothing some parts, hollowing others. Where the rock was softer, it yielded. Where it was harder, it resisted. Slowly, without any intention, the shape of an elephant began to emerge. Your mind starts to wander. Why an elephant? Why not some other shape? The truth is, it could have been anything, a jagged spike, a featureless lump. But nature's chaos and symmetry sometimes meet in ways that mirror the living world. And when that happens, our eyes and minds can't help but recognize it, to name it, to feel a kind of kinship with stone. Up close, the trunk is a graceful arch, broad enough for two people to walk beneath. In midday, the shadow it casts is a perfect, curved silhouette, as though the elephant is dipping its trunk into an invisible pool. If you stand just right and look through that arch, you'll see the desert stretching endlessly beyond, broken only by the shimmer of heat on the horizon. Geologists studying the Elephant Rock can tell you that its surface is slowly retreating by about a millimeter every few decades. It sounds like nothing yet. That's a pace fast enough to erase carvings left by travelers only a few hundred years ago. The rock is both monument and hourglass, permanent in our lifetimes, transient in the scale of Earth. A few desert birds rest in the crevices along its back, their calls echoing softly. You can picture the elephant breathing in the heat and exhaling slowly, just as the wind snakes its way around and through the arch. You might even wonder if this stone could speak. Would it tell the story of every storm that's ever passed here, every footstep that circled its base? Every night it stood in silver moonlight, watching constellations wheel above. The desert has its own quiet clock. Temperatures shift sharply between day and night, causing the stone to expand and contract. Over centuries, this thermal rhythm has worked alongside the wind to carve the elephant's wrinkles, its ear-like ridges, its broad flanks. If you run your fingers along the surface, you feel the faint grain, the ghost of the ancient sand dunes that birthed it. And here's a thought to let drift through your mind. Perhaps in another few thousand years, the trunk will wear thin and collapse, leaving only a torso, a hint of what was once a perfect elephant. Future travelers might see something else entirely in the remnant shape. The stone will still be here, but the story we tell about it will have changed. You take a step back, letting the whole figure fill your vision. The elephant seems calm, steady, unbothered by time. It is not moving yet. The way the arch sweeps forward feels like motion, frozen mid-step. You imagine it, walking across the desert slow and deliberate, carrying the weight of centuries with the same quiet grace it carries the sky. Leaving the desert's warm breath behind you, follow the sound of waves. The air grows damp and carries the scent of salt and kelp. Soon the land drops away, revealing the jagged profile of the dragon's spine cliffs. From this vantage point, they look as though a massive sea dragon has curled along the shoreline, its back arched, every ridge a row of stone scales. Each scale is a cliff face, and each cliff face rises steeply from the churning sea below. The rocks here are ancient basalt, born from molten lava that spilled from the Earth's crust millions of years ago. When that lava met the cool embrace of the ocean, it hardened into columns and ridges, the way cooling chocolate can snap into sharp edges. Over eons, the pounding surf gnawed at the base of these cliffs, cutting away softer layers and leaving behind the stubborn, jagged spine. You stand close enough to feel the ocean spray tiny cold droplets on your face, and you can hear the deep boom as waves slam into the rock. Oh, the sound rolls through your chest like the dragon's slow, rumbling growl. Here and there the scales are green, with clinging seaweed glistening like the sheen of wet reptilian skin. Gulls wheel overhead, their cries sharp and distant, like the dragon's unseen offspring calling to it. Why do these shapes feel so alive? Perhaps it's because motion is hidden in every line. The spine rises and dips, like a creature breathing each curve, a reminder of how molten rock once flowed here, liquid and alive. You might ask yourself, if this dragon could wake, would it slip back into the water, leaving only the froth and the memory of its passing? Or would it take to the air, shaking the cliffs loose into the sea? From this spot you can trace the entire body for several kilometers. The highest spike stands nearly 90 meters tall, home to hardy shrubs that have somehow found root in the thin cracks between stones. In storms, the waves here can reach halfway up the cliff, striking with enough force to hurl stones the size of fists. These impacts leave behind fresh fractures, new textures in the dragon's armor. Geologists call this process marine erosion, and they can measure its power. Some years, a single winter storm can remove several cubic meters of rock from a particularly exposed section. But the dragon endures, just as it has endured for tens of thousands of storms before. Step closer, and you see narrow sea caves between the ridges. The largest of them opens like a dragon's eye, a dark oval watching the ocean's endless motion. If you crouch at the opening, the sound changes. The boom of waves becomes a deep hum, resonating like a giant's heartbeat. The air inside is cool, damp, and carries the mineral scent of basalt mixed with salt. Looking upward, the sky is a pale wash of blue, and the dragon's back cuts a sharp line against it. The longer you stare, the easier it becomes to see the creature not as stone, pretending to be scales, but as a living guardian of the coast, frozen in place to keep watch. And maybe in some sense, it is alive, not in the way of breath and blood, but in the way landscapes pulse, with constant change, reshaping themselves in slow, invisible motion. The tide begins to rise, and the waves push higher, sending spray that catches the sunlight in tiny rainbows. You take a deep breath, tasting the sea on your lips. The dragon's spine glistens in the shifting light, as if it's quietly pleased you've come to see it. And in a way, it has told you its story, not with words, but with stone water and the unbroken rhythm of the tides. The sea air clings to your skin as you move inland again, winding along a path that crests a gentle rise. Beyond it, the horizon seems to ripple in a strange organic way until you realize you're looking at the Turtle Island. From this high vantage, the shape is undeniable, the rounded dome of a shell, the smaller head jutting forward, and four broad flippers extending into the turquoise water. It's as if a colossal turtle paused mid-swim and decided to sleep here, half in the ocean, half on land. The island itself is made mostly of limestone, born from the compressed remains of ancient coral reefs. Hundreds of millions of tiny marine organisms built their skeletons here, layer upon layer, until the structure became strong enough to resist the shifting tides. When sea levels changed, parts of this reef lifted into the open air, where rain began carving shallow grooves across the surface, deepening the turtle's shell patterns over tens of thousands of years. As you approach by boat, the illusion becomes even stronger. The head is a gentle rise of stone, dotted with low shrubs, while the eyes are actually tidal pools, each home to a tiny universe of life. You lean over one pool and spot darting minnows, a starfish clinging to the rock, and tiny crabs moving sideways like cautious sentinels. Why do you think certain landscapes stir such affection in us? Perhaps because when we recognize something familiar, a living shape, a gentle curve, we feel less alone in the vastness of nature. We start to imagine a personality behind the form, and standing here, it's easy to picture the Turtle Island as a quiet elder, patiently holding the coastline together with its stony flippers. Geologists have measured the limestone here to be around 40 million years old. During its lifetime, this land has seen entire species come and go, coastlines redraw themselves, and storms so powerful they altered the shape of the shell overnight. Even now, the water continues its work. Every wave that crashes against the island's base dissolves just a fraction of its surface, taking microscopic particles of the turtle back into the sea. From the deck of the boat, you can see seabirds resting along the flippers, their white feathers stark against the gray-beige stone. In certain seasons, sea turtles, real ones, come ashore here to lay their eggs, making the illusion complete. You imagine a turtle nesting on the back of a much larger turtle, and for a moment it feels like you've stumbled into a quiet joke played by nature itself. The wind softens as you drift closer to shore. You can hear the lapping of small waves against the stone, a gentle rhythm like the steady breath of a sleeper. The sun warms your shoulders, and the light glints off patches of wet rock where the tide has recently retreated, making the turtle's shell gleam as though freshly polished. Walking across its surface, you find that the shell is not smooth at all, but textured with ridges, pits, and narrow channels carved by rainwater. Each groove holds traces of the island's long memory, fragments of shells, tiny fossils, grains of sand carried by wind from faraway shores. If you crouch and run your fingertips along the stone, it's cool despite the sun, as if the turtle's body still holds the deep calm of the ocean below. You pause and look back toward the mainland. From here, the turtle seems to be swimming away, pulling the horizon with it. You wonder if it could move, where would it go? Would it seek out warmer waters, or would it dive deep into the open sea, vanishing entirely from human eyes? The tide begins to rise again, and the water swirls around the flippers. Slowly, it starts to cover the lower edges until the turtle looks as though it's sinking back into the sea for another 1,000-year nap. You take one last look before the boat turns towards shore, carrying with you the image of a gentle giant who has been here long before you arrived and will be here long after you leave. The shoreline fades behind you, and soon you're following a narrow trail through coastal pines. The path opens to a bluff where the sea stretches endlessly before you, its surface a restless mirror of blue and silver. Below the waves hidden from casual eyes lies the whale rock beneath the sea. From above you can see it in the water, a massive rounded shape, darker than the surrounding seabed, its smooth back arcing gently before tapering into a tail that seems poised to flick. The illusion is so precise that your mind fills in details: the sleek skin, the slow, powerful motion. You almost expect the surface to break as the whale exhales a cloud of mist into the air. This formation is actually a submerged ridge of granite pushed upward by tectonic forces millions of years ago, and later partially drowned by rising seas. Over centuries, currents have polished its contours, smoothed the way river stones become rounded in a stream. Layers of algae cling to its surface, their deep green making the whale shape even more distinct against the pale sand. Standing here, you feel the steady rhythm of waves against the cliff below, as if echoing the whale's slow heartbeat. And you might find yourself wondering, does the ocean remember the shapes it makes? Is this stone whale a memory, a tribute to living giants that roam these waters? Still, marine biologists have measured the ridge to be over 150 meters long, longer than any living whale today. In some places, the granite rises only a few meters below the surface, making it visible from boats when the water is clear. In others, it sinks down steeply into darker depths, its tail vanishing into shadows. Beneath the surface, life flourishes. Schools of silver fish flash over the whale's back, their movements like fleeting ripples of sunlight. Sea anemones sway in slow motion along its sides, and lobsters scuttle between cracks in the stone. At certain times of year, migrating whales pass directly above the formation, their real bodies gliding over their silent stone counterpart. It's a meeting of living and ancient forms, a brief overlap in two vastly different timelines. The water here is colder than it looks, fed by deep ocean currents. When storms roll in, waves slam against the ridge with such force that they send vibrations through the seabed detectable miles away. These impacts slowly chip at the granite, though the stone is so hard that changes are nearly imperceptible within a human lifetime. As you watch, the tide shifts, and sunlight begins to strike the whale rock from a different angle. Its shape sharpens shadows, defining the gentle dip of the dorsal fin and the slight rise of the eye. It's strange, the more you look, the less it feels like coincidence. You start to believe that perhaps the sea itself shaped this ridge deliberately, carrying the memory of whales in its currents and sculpting a tribute in stone. The breeze picks up, carrying the briny scent of kelp. A lone gull drifts overhead, its call thin against the vastness of the ocean. The whale rock remains still anchored to the seabed, yet it feels as alive as any creature moving through the water. It's a reminder that not all life is measured in movement. Some things live simply by holding their shape against the endless patience of time. The sound of the waves fades as you follow a winding road inland through scrub and low hills. Soon the land drops away into a valley, and there it is, the crocodile's head. Even from a distance, the resemblance is uncanny. A long, flat snout of rock, rough-textured scales along the ridge, and a raised eye that seems to watch the horizon. The formation juts from the cliffside as if a massive reptile has just surfaced from the depths of the earth and frozen mid-breath. Up close, the head looms nearly 50 meters from snout to neck. The rock is a mix of sandstone and shale, laid down in layers millions of years apart. Once this land was a swampy river, delta rich with mud and silt. Over time, those sediments hardened into stone, trapping within them tiny fossils of plants and shells, the quiet fingerprints of vanished ecosystems. Wind and water began the carving work. Rainwater found its way into hairline cracks, freezing in winter and expanding just enough to widen them. The softer shale wore away, faster than the sandstone, leaving jagged ridges and deep pits that give the crocodile its rough, armored look. Over millennia, the shape grew more distinct until it seemed less like an accident and more like a deliberate sculpture. The eye is a rounded bulge of particularly hard sandstone, polished smooth by centuries of erosion. Standing below it, you can almost imagine it, blinking slow and heavy-lidded, before returning to its stone stillness. The snout narrows to a blunt tip that overhangs the valley floor, and in certain light, its shadow stretches like an open jaw, ready to snap shut. You might pause here and ask yourself, do we give the rock its crocodile identity, or has it been quietly wearing it all along, waiting for someone to notice? Our minds are quick to name, but perhaps the land has its own intentions, shaping itself into the likenesses of creatures we already know. The valley below is dotted with acacia trees and low shrubs. When rain falls rare but welcome, here water runs down the crocodile's jaws into a small seasonal pool at its base. In those brief wet months, frogs gather here, their calls echoing against the rock in a chorus that feels like a living soundtrack for the silent predator above. Geologists estimate that parts of this formation are over 80 million years old, dating back to when dinosaurs still roamed. It's humbling to think the crocodile has watched continents shift. Climates swing from tropical heat to icy drought, and entire species appear and vanish. If you step back far enough, the illusion strengthens. The curve of the cliff behind it becomes the suggestion of a body submerged in the water of land, as if the rest of the reptile lies just out of sight. Sunset paints the rock in shades of gold and amber, the eye catching the last flare of light before the shadow of the hill overtakes it. You stay until the first stars appear. The crocodile's head is darker now, less detailed, yet somehow more alive in silhouette, as if it has slipped from stone into dream, waiting for the night to pass before resuming its patient watch over the valley. The road narrows into a dirt track lined with wild grasses that sway in the evening breeze. You follow it until the ground rises steeply, leading you to a plateau that ends in a sudden drop. There, jutting from the edge like a solitary sentinel, is the owl's watchtower. It's a single towering column of basalt, nearly 60 meters high, its surface patterned with vertical grooves like feathers pressed into stone. At the top, the column flares slightly, forming a rounded head shape. Two large hollows, perhaps the work of centuries of wind and rain, sit just beneath the brow, perfectly positioned to resemble the deep, unblinking eyes of an owl. The resemblance is so strong that you half expect the tower to pivot silently toward you, its gaze following your every step. The basalt is dark, almost black when shadowed, but when the sun strikes it directly, it reveals a fine crystalline shimmer, the memory of its fiery birth. This stone began as molten lava, cooling slowly enough for crystals to grow, but quickly enough to trap them in tight formation. Erosion shaped the owl over an impossibly long timeline. The surrounding cliffs crumbled away, leaving the denser basalt pillar behind. In storms, rainwater channels down its sides, deepening the grooves and sharpening the feathers. The hollows of the eyes may once have been softer rock layers that surrendered to weather more quickly, leaving behind sockets that now stare across the valley. Standing at the base, you can feel the wind rushing past, funneled upward by the cliff face. It whistles softly like a distant call. You might wonder if this owl were alive. What stories could it tell of the centuries it has stood here? Would it recall the passing of herds, the slow change of the forest, below the countless sunrises it has greeted without ever closing its eyes? Geologists believe the tower has resisted collapse, partly because of its hexagonal internal structure, a natural geometry formed as the lava cooled and contracted. This same structure gives it strength against the pressure of wind and rain, allowing it to outlast the softer surrounding stone. Birds make real use of it now. Ravens and kestrels nest in ledges near the top, their silhouettes flitting against the sky. In the evening light, their movements almost seem like the owl's own feathers ruffling. At night, bats emerge from crevices along the column, darting into the dark in search of insects. As the sun dips lower, the shadow of the watchtower stretches far across the land. The eyes catch the last glow of gold before the light slips away, entirely leaving the owl cloaked in deep blue. From here you can see it, keeping its silent vigil over both forest and sky, a guardian made not of feather and bone, but of patient, enduring stone. You step back onto the trail, glancing over your shoulder one last time. Even in twilight, the watchtower's gaze seems to follow you, not in a menacing way, but as if it is quietly making sure you leave the plateau safely before returning to its eternal watch. The path dips down from the plateau and meanders into a valley where the air feels cooler, the scent of damp soil mixing with the faint tang of lichen. Ahead, framed by a patch of open meadow, stand two immense boulders, leaning toward each other, as if frozen in a mid-step embrace, the dancing bear stones. At first glance, they truly look like a pair of bears caught in motion. One is slightly taller, its head tilted down as though gazing at its partner. The other seems to be stretching upward paws, reaching out. The space between them forms a narrow gap, just wide enough for a person to walk through, like slipping into the middle of a stone waltz. These boulders are glacial erratics, massive chunks of granite carried here by an ancient glacier roughly 12,000 years ago. When the ice sheet melted, it simply dropped them where it stood, like a giant, leaving behind its toys. Over millennia, wind, rain, and frost carved subtle curves into the rock, softening their sharp edges until the silhouettes began to resemble something alive. Up close, you see the granite is speckled with black mica and pale quartz sparkling faintly where the sun hits it. Lichen patches spread across their shoulders, like natural fur in shades of gray-green and ochre. In the rain, the stones darken to a deep, almost chocolate brown, making the illusion of bears even stronger. Why do you think they seem so companionable? Perhaps because the angle of their lean suggests motion toward each other rather than apart. Nature rarely stages such gentle, balanced poses. Yet here, it's as if the land decided to freeze a moment of affection in stone. Geologists studying the area have found scratches along the base of both boulders, long, shallow lines called glacial striations, carved when the rocks were still embedded in the moving ice. Those marks are a quiet reminder that these dancers once traveled together side by side across miles of frozen landscape before arriving here. Local wildlife interacts with them too. Marmots sun themselves on the flat backs in summer, and in winter, foxes sometimes curl in the shelter of the gap between them to escape the wind. In spring, wildflowers bloom at their base, yellow buttercups and purple lupines that look like they've been scattered for decoration. Standing between the bears, you can place a palm on each paw and feel their cool solidity. The gap amplifies sound, so the rustle of grass or the far-off call of a bird seems louder here, as if the stones themselves are humming quietly to one another. You might even imagine that when the night is deep and the valley still, the bears sway, gently resuming their dance for an audience of stars. From a distance, the valley frames them perfectly, two figures caught forever in motion. You take a step back and the illusion becomes complete again. The taller bear dips slightly, the smaller lifts higher, and together they seem ready to turn in a slow, graceful spin across the meadow. You follow the meadow's gentle slope until it narrows into a rocky gorge. The air here feels different, heavier, as if sound itself slows down. Then you see at the entrance to Lion's Roar Canyon. From this angle, the resemblance is astonishing. The canyon's mouth forms the wide-open jaws of a great lion, its teeth sharp pillars of rock, its mane a cascade of jagged cliffs fanning out on either side. Above, the brow ridge of stone forms the suggestion of watchful eyes. In the late afternoon light, shadows deepen the features until they look carved with deliberate intent. The mane is composed of layers of metamorphic rock schist and gneiss, twisted and folded by immense geological pressures hundreds of millions of years ago. These folds give the appearance of thick, textured hair frozen mid-motion, like a gust of wind caught in stone. Over time, frost wedging and landslides chipped away at the cliffs, creating deep channels that add volume to the mane's shape. The lion's teeth are natural pillars of resistant quartzite, each standing several meters high. When wind whips through the canyon, it hums and moans in a way that's easy to imagine as the low, distant roar of the stone predator itself. During storms, the sound grows louder, the rain adding a percussion of soft impacts on rock nature's drumbeat to accompany the voice of the lion. You might pause here and ask yourself, are we the ones giving this place its voice, or is it speaking already in the language of echo and erosion, and we're only now noticing? The canyon floor is a mix of sand and rounded pebbles, evidence of a river that once carved its way through. That river is gone now, reduced to a trickle in wetter months, but its history is etched into the smooth walls that curve inward like the shape of a throat. These walls are streaked with iron oxide, giving them a deep rust-red color, the perfect shade for the lion's mouth. Local legends speak of the canyon as a guardian roaring to warn travelers of approaching danger. And perhaps there's some truth in that flash floods can sweep through here without warning, the water rising from ankle-deep to chest-high in minutes. The walls, once a safe passage, become a trap if you don't read the signs in time. From within, you look back toward the entrance, and the lion's head frames the sky. The mane glows gold where the sun strikes it, while the rest lies in deep shadow. A hawk circles above, briefly passing between the eyes, as though the lion is blinking. Geologists estimate that the main features of the canyon were shaped over the last 2 million years, with the finer details, the teeth, the mane being more recent products of freeze-thaw cycles and the relentless scouring of wind. Even so, the illusion is so precise that it feels like the work of a single steady hand. As the sun lowers, the lion's profile darkens until it becomes a silhouette, its open mouth now a pure black void. It's easy to imagine the canyon waiting for the night when the stars will spill above its head like a mane of silver light. Past the canyon, the land opens again, and you find yourself in a valley scattered with boulders the size of cottages. They rest in strange positions, some balanced precariously on narrow points, others leaning against each other, as if in quiet conversation. And there, right in the middle of the field, stands the most improbable of them, all the turtle sentinel. From afar, it's a clear silhouette, a massive stone shell, domed and ridged with a squat, protruding head, angled slightly upward as if surveying the horizon. The proportions are so close to a real turtle's that you half expect it to shuffle forward in the grass. Up close, the shell is a single block of granite, nearly 7 meters across its surface, etched with a pattern of polygonal cracks formed over millennia of weathering. Lichens in green gold and pale blue fill these cracks, creating a mosaic that looks like the intricate scutes of a real turtle's carapace. The head is a smaller boulder, fused to the main body through pressure, and mineral cement jutting forward in a pose of quiet watchfulness. The turtle sentinel's origin likely dates back to the last glacial period, around 15,000 years ago. As glaciers retreated, they left behind these erratic boulders, carried for hundreds of kilometers in the ice's slow grip. When the ice melted, the rocks dropped where they now stand, some arranged purely by chance into shapes that mimic life. You might pause here and ask, is it chance that made the turtle sentinel, or is it our pattern-seeking minds sculpting a friend from silent stone? The ground beneath is carpeted with meadow plants, but around the turtle's feet, the grass grows shorter, perhaps from the shade it casts, perhaps from subtle differences in soil moisture caused by its mass. In the early morning, dew collects on the stone and drips steadily down like the slow blink of a heavy-lidded eye. Standing beside it, you notice the air here feels stiller, muffled. The surrounding boulders, some shaped like vague companions, a smaller turtle, a heron with a long neck, form a kind of silent court. It's easy to imagine the turtle sentinel as an ancient protector, keeping quiet watch over this glacial meadow for thousands of years. Granite like this is incredibly resistant to erosion. It could stand here nearly unchanged for another 1,000,000 years. The minerals that give it strength, feldspar quartz, mica, are locked in a crystalline structure that shrugs off rain and wind, but not completely. Freeze-thaw cycles still pry loose tiny grains, which the wind then carries away grain by grain. Even the mightiest stone is slowly, patiently worn down. The sun slips lower, and the turtle sentinel's shadow stretches long toward the west. The lichens glow faintly under the last light, like a slow pulse of life. You find yourself smiling at the thought that this immovable creature might still be traveling not across the land, but through time, from the age of ice to the age of humans, and perhaps beyond. Beyond the meadow, the trail narrows and begins to climb again. The air grows cooler, scented faintly with pine resin drifting from higher slopes. You follow the winding path until it opens onto a wide ledge that overlooks a sheer cliff face. And there, anchored halfway down the drop, is a shape so uncanny it stops you mid-step, the eagle guardian. At first glance, it's a vast stone bird with its wings spread in mid-flight talons, gripping a protruding ledge as though ready to launch into the wind. The beak curves sharply downward, and shadows carve hollows where eyes should be. Even from this distance, you can almost sense its watchful gaze sweeping the valley below. The rock itself is sandstone layered, like pages in a very old book. Over millions of years, differential erosion wind, gnawing away softer bands, rain carving narrow channels, has shaped those layers into the proud arch of a neck and the broad sweep of wings. The cliff's reddish tone deepens in the afternoon light, making the eagle guardian look alive. Feathers burnished in sunset gold. Closer inspection reveals its scale. The wingspan stretches nearly 12 meters from tip to tip, each ridge and groove like the barb of a giant feather. The cliff beneath the talons is pitted with small caves homes for swallows, kestrels, and the occasional bat. You wonder how many generations of real birds have rested in the shadow of their stone ancestor. It's easy to imagine the eagle guardian as more than stone, perhaps a sentinel from a forgotten age, frozen mid-watch by some ancient spell. Your mind wanders. What would it have seen in its time? The slow migration of forests up the slope, the first humans tracing the valley below, the rise and fall of rivers in flood and drought. Scientifically, this rock is a rare example of a wind-sculpted monolith forming on a vertical plane. Most such formations occur in open desert landscapes, but here the cliff face channels wind upward in strong gusts, allowing sand and grit to etch the stone in precise arcs. Measurements of erosion suggest the feathers of the wings deepen by only a fraction of a millimeter. Each year, a change imperceptible to us, yet constant as breath. Standing here, you can hear the faint rush of wind rising from the canyon below. It threads through cracks in the rock, producing a soft, flute-like whistle. You tilt your head and wonder, is it the stone singing to itself, or to you? The ledge where you stand feels almost like a perch, a place to pause and let the mind drift. The valley spreads wide beneath the eagle's gaze, dotted with meadows and ribbons of river, the turtle sentinel now a distant smudge in the green. A hawk circles far below, then banks upward toward you, only to veer at the last moment, as though giving silent acknowledgement to the guardian in the cliff. For a long while you just watch the light shifting the wind, curling the eagle's stone form, unchanging. Yet somehow you feel that if you turned your head quickly enough, you might catch it moving wings, flexing ever so slightly in the fading light. The trail beyond the eagle guardian dips into shadow, winding between jagged pillars of stone that rise like scattered sentinels. The air here is cooler, still damp with the faint scent of lichen and moss. The sound of the wind fades, replaced by the slow drip of water somewhere deeper ahead. You round a bend, and the path opens into a small basin enclosed by rock walls. At its center stands a formation so strange it feels as though you've stumbled into a dream, the stone whale. It breaches upward from the earth, as if caught in mid-leap, its massive head angled towards the sky mouth just slightly open. The smooth curve of its back gleams in the low light, worn sleek by centuries of rain. Down one side, a long groove runs from head to tail, like the faint suggestion of a dorsal fin. The rock itself is gray, basalt, dense and fine-grained, born from ancient volcanic flows that cooled in thick, undulating layers. Here, water has been the sculptor. Seasonal rains pour into this basin and pool at the whale's base, then overflow in silvery streams that trickle down its sides. Over time, these streams carved away softer mineral veins, accentuating the whale's contours. In some places, the surface shines as though polished, while in others, patches of pale lichen form mottled barnacles. You step closer, and a hollow resonance answers your footfalls. There's a deep cavity within the whale's head. When the wind hits just right, air moves through it with a low sonorous hum, like the distant song of a real whale calling through the ocean. It's easy to imagine the rock breathing, sighing into the stillness. If you rest your palm against the surface, it feels faintly cool, almost alive. You think about how strange it is that this shape emerged not from the hands of an artist, but from countless tiny forces, a drop of rain, a gust of wind, a fragment of ice wedging into a crack and prying it wider. And you can't help but ask yourself, do shapes like this happen by chance alone, or does the world sometimes sculpt them deliberately for reasons we may never understand? Science suggests chance basalt resists erosion unevenly, leaving behind odd silhouettes, as surrounding stone weathers away. But there's also a curious alignment here. The whale's leap points toward a gap in the cliff wall, exactly where sunlight spills in for a few minutes each late afternoon. During that window, the whale's head glows as if lit from within, and its shadow stretches long and graceful across the basin floor. A pair of mountain goats pick their way along the rim above, pausing to look down at you. For a moment, it feels like you're both spectators to the same performance, a stone whale frozen mid-breach, caught between the motion of time and the stillness of stone. The hum of wind through the hollow deepens, reverberating in your chest. It's a sound you could almost fall asleep to if you let yourself sink into the moment. Somewhere behind you, a droplet falls into a pool, with a faint plink as though marking the slow passage of an unseen clock. You breathe in the cool, mineral-rich air and linger a little longer, feeling as though the stone whale is not simply a rock to be looked at, but a creature that might, under the right conditions, stir to life and swim away into the endless sea of stone surrounding it. Leaving the stone whale behind you, follow the narrow path upward. Again, climbing a ridge where the ground feels rough. Underfoot, shards of weathered rock crunching softly with each step. The air grows drier, the wind stronger, and a thin veil of dust swirls in small eddies across the trail. You crest the ridge and stop, because before you looms the most unexpected shape, yet the sitting elephant. At first glance, it's uncanny. A colossal form crouches at the edge of the plateau, its bulk hunched as though resting after a long trek. Its body is a thick dome of pale granite, streaked with faint rust-colored lines like the wrinkles on an elephant's hide. The head droops forward, a long stone trunk curling almost to the ground. Even the rough, knobby outcroppings along its back evoke the folds of skin that gather across an elephant's shoulders. The illusion is so perfect, you almost expect its chest to rise and fall. But the closer you step, the more you can read the geologic story behind the creature. This granite began as molten magma, cooling slowly deep beneath the earth. Over tens of millions of years, uplift brought it to the surface, where temperature shifts cracked it in predictable patterns. Rain, wind, and frost wore away the sharper edges, rounding them into smooth, animal-like curves. A thin trickle of water runs down one side of the trunk, carrying grains of mica that glint like tiny stars when the sun catches them. You imagine the rock bending its head to sip from an invisible stream, and for a heartbeat, you wonder if these shapes are the Earth's way of telling stories, tales of strength, patience, and survival carved into the landscape. You kneel to touch the granite, feeling the warmth it's absorbed from the sun. It's dry and faintly rough, the texture of time itself. A small clump of sagebrush grows right where the ear would be, as if nature decided to add its own flourish to the illusion. You find yourself asking, do our minds find animals in stone because we long to connect with something familiar, or because nature knows we'll recognize the life it hides there? Scientifically, this is a textbook example of pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful shapes in random forms. Yet the stone's anatomy is more than mere chance. The elephant's trunk is an exfoliation joint where sheets of granite have peeled away in long arcs. The back is an old fault line smoothed by centuries of glacial polish, when ice once swept across this plateau, grinding the surface into gentle slopes. As the wind whips across the ridge, it whistles softly in a small gap beneath the chin. If you close your eyes, the sound is low and resonant, almost like a distant rumble, the faint echo of a real elephant's call rolling across a savanna, transposed into stone. A hawk circles above, casting a shifting shadow over the formation. Its spiral seems to frame the sitting elephant, as if it were guarding it, or perhaps waiting for it to rise and lumber onward. But the stone does not move, not in any way you can see, and yet you sense that time itself is moving here, that in another few thousand years the trunk will crumble, the back will split, and the elephant will dissolve into unrecognizable shapes, leaving only memories for those who saw it like this. You linger for a while, tracing the stone's curves with your gaze, letting your mind drift between the geological facts and the quiet fantasy of an ancient animal resting here at the edge of the world. Then gently, you turn away the sound of the wind, still carrying that deep, imagined rumble in your ears. The trail bends along the shoulder of the plateau, where the air feels thinner and the horizon stretches out in every direction. Your footsteps fall softly on a bed of pale dust and small stones that crunch faintly as if they were whispering to each other about how long they've been here. The wind has a steady voice, now not harsh, but persistent, carrying the scent of sun-baked minerals and something faintly sweet from a nearby stand of wildflowers. Then you see it rising, just beyond a cluster of weathered boulders, the reclining dragon. It's not the fierce, sharp-edged creature of myths, but a gentler one stretched out lazily, as though napping after a long flight. Its head rests on one elbow of stone eyes, half closed, a ridge of jagged spines running down its back. The tail tapers away into a coil that curls around a smaller mound of rock as if protectively. From a distance, the outline is unmistakable, the dragon's silhouette framed perfectly against the pale blue sky. But as you walk closer, the truth begins to reveal itself in layers. The dragon is made from basalt, a dark, volcanic rock that cooled quickly from lava flows millions of years ago. These basalt columns, once vertical, have slumped over time, tilting and fracturing into angled plates that mimic the look of scales. The spines are actually erosion-resistant dikes, vertical walls of harder rock that remain standing while the softer basalt around them wears away. Each spine catches the sun differently, so the dragon's back glitters in shifting patches of silver and charcoal, like the slow ripple of muscle under a real creature's skin. You place a hand on one of these spines, feeling the faintly pitted surface. It's warm from the sun, yet solid in a way that seems beyond the reach of change, though you know scientifically it's changing even now. Every gust of wind steals away a few grains of rock. Every winter, frost wedges open another crack. The dragon's nap is not eternal. It's just long enough that human lifetimes barely register to it. You wonder, are we drawn to dragons in stone because they've lived in our myths for centuries, or did the myths themselves grow from sights like this? Ancient travelers seeing shapes in the land and giving them stories. Perhaps the earth has always been the first storyteller, and we've only ever been translators. In the stillness, you notice something else. Near the head, tucked in a natural hollow, a pool of rainwater reflects the sky. In its glassy surface, you can see clouds drifting, and with a shift of your angle, the dragon's face appears to watch them patient and unblinking. A pair of swallows dart above the pool, their wings casting quick shadows across the dragon's snout. The scientific mind notes that such hollows, called taphoni, form when salt crystallizes in tiny pores of the rock, forcing them open over time. The poetic mind, meanwhile, imagines the dragon collecting these sky reflections as dreams, storing them for when it wakes. The wind sighs against the basalt, producing a faint humming note. You pause and listen, realizing that the sound deepens when you move between the spines, a natural pipe organ of stone, playing a tune so slow and airy it could lull a mountain to sleep. It makes you think that perhaps the dragon's breath is not fire, but music released only for those who stand close enough to hear. You stay for a while, circling the reclining dragon, watching how its form changes from different angles. From one side, it looks ready to rise. From another, it's simply a ridge of rock. The truth, you think, is that it's both. Finally, you turn to continue along the trail, but you glance back once more. The dragon seems a little smaller now, folded into the landscape as if it has settled deeper into its dream. You leave the dragon behind the wind, carrying its low stone hum into the distance, and follow the path as it dips into a shallow valley. Here the earth feels quieter, almost holding its breath. Sparse tufts of grass grow in pale soil, and scattered ahead are shapes that at first glance seem like giant birds huddled together, long necks bending gracefully toward the ground. The closer you come, the clearer the illusion becomes. These aren't birds of feather and bone, but towering pillars of sandstone, their tops curving and narrowing like the bowed necks of cranes. Each one stands alone, yet their proximity to each other creates the impression of a small flock grazing silently in the valley. Their surfaces are streaked with colors that look as though an artist dipped a brush in sunrise bands of soft ochre, dusty rose, and hints of violet. These colors are the result of iron oxide and manganese in the sandstone, which stain the grains differently, depending on how much groundwater once flowed through each layer. It's strange to think that what appears to be painted feathers is actually the memory of minerals moving through stone millions of years ago. The necks are the slender upper portions of the pillars, carved by wind in a process called differential erosion. The softer rock wears away faster than the harder caprock at the top, leaving an elegant, tapering column. You tilt your head back to take in their full height. Some reach over 10 meters, though they seem even taller against the flat valley floor. You place your hand on one, feeling how cool and slightly gritty it is. The grains shift under your fingers, ever so slightly proof that the wind is still at work. Somewhere in the future, these cranes will lose their necks entirely, toppling into heaps of stone. But tonight they stand poised in perfect balance, as if frozen mid-step. It makes you wonder if stone can hold itself in such delicate shapes for so long. Why does it seem impossible for us to stay still for even a moment? Perhaps the cranes know something about patience that we've yet to learn. Between two of the pillars, a gap frames the horizon, and through it, you see a sunset beginning to bleed into the valley. Orange deepening to crimson, then fading into soft purples. The light catches the curves of the stone necks, so they seem to glow faintly from within, like lanterns lit from some secret hollow. You crouch down and notice faint etchings at the base of one pillar, shallow grooves running in swirling patterns. They're not human markings, but the delicate trails left by ancient water, which once pooled and trickled here, carving its own calligraphy into the sandstone. If the cranes could read, perhaps these would be their old stories, kept low to the ground for hatchlings to learn. Scientifically, you know these grooves are called flute marks, formed when sediments in flowing water scour and swirl against the rock. But it's equally tempting to think of them as the graceful signatures of a flock that never truly leaves even when the wind scatters their dust. As the light fades, the valley grows hushed again. A faint breeze slides between the pillars, and for a moment the sound is like soft wing beats. You close your eyes listening, almost expecting to feel the rush of air from great wings passing overhead. When you open them, the cranes remain where they are, their stone necks still bent to graze their bodies rooted deep into the earth. You take a slow breath, feeling the same quiet patience settle into you, and then you move on, leaving the valley to its flock. The trail meanders upward again, winding between low ridges where the rock underfoot shifts from warm sandstone to a harder, darker basalt. The air here feels cooler, touched by the shadow of the high cliffs ahead. As you round a bend, the landscape changes abruptly, and there they are, the stone elephants. They stand shoulder to shoulder, massive and solemn, as if guarding some ancient pass. At first glance, they could almost be real broad-domed heads, long tapering trunks reaching toward the ground and thick, rounded bodies. But instead of gray hide, their skin is a tapestry of mineral-stained basalt, dark with streaks of rusty red and pale silver. You walk closer, feeling the odd mix of amusement and awe that always comes when nature perfectly mimics life. The elephants' trunks are the most convincing part, narrow pillars of rock that extend from the bulk of their bodies, formed when cracks in the basalt eroded more slowly than the surrounding stone. These narrow forms resisted collapse, thanks to the basalt's crystalline structure, the same dense interlocking pattern that makes it so tough to break. Each elephant stands about 5 meters high, though erosion has softened their outlines. Wind and rain have polished some surfaces smooth, while others still hold jagged ridges, wrinkles frozen in time. The mineral deposits add detail that could fool the eye, thin, pale streaks like veins under the skin, and patches of lichen blooming in soft greens and yellows, giving the illusion of age spots. You imagine the herd in motion, the leader's trunk raised, testing the air, while the others shuffle slowly forward, carrying the weight of invisible centuries. And perhaps in a way they are moving basalt columns can shift ever so slightly over decades, as the surrounding soil erodes tilting or leaning like tired beasts. There's a faint echo in the pass between their legs. You step into the shade under one stone belly, the air immediately cooler. The hollow space smells faintly of damp earth, though there's no visible moisture. Here the sound of your breath comes back to you in a soft double, as if the elephant is exhaling with you. It makes you wonder if these shapes can trick your eyes. Could they also trick your instincts? Would a predator, thousands of years ago, have hesitated at the sight of them? Or perhaps early humans gave them meaning, building myths around their presence. Geologically speaking, their formation is straightforward. Millions of years ago, lava cooled into columnar basalt, contracting into hexagonal columns. Over eons, fractures, frost, and wind carved away the outer columns, leaving behind these rounded, trunk-like projections. But the simplicity of the process doesn't lessen the magic of the result. The sun begins to lower behind the ridge, throwing the elephants into silhouette. Their dark shapes look even more alive now, massive against the strip of glowing sky. You can almost see the slow sway of trunks, the shifting of weight from one foot to another. You rest your hand against the rough basalt. It's warmer than the air it's been soaking in sunlight all day. You feel the heat radiating into your palm, and for a moment, it's as if the elephant breathes again, its stone heart still holding the fire of the earth from which it was born. You step back into the open, taking one last look at the silent herd before continuing. Behind you, the elephants keep their vigil, guarding the pass with patience measured not in years, but in millennia. The land ahead dips into a shallow basin where wind seems to gather before moving on. At the center of this natural amphitheater rises something so delicate you almost hesitate to believe it's real, the rock swan. From a distance it looks poised on the surface of an invisible lake neck, arched in a perfect curve, head tilted slightly as though scanning the horizon. Its body is a smooth, pale mass of limestone, streaked faintly with gold, where iron minerals have seeped through. The neck, impossibly slender, compared to the rest, seems to defy gravity. You half expect it to lower its head and preen its stone feathers. The swan's graceful form is no accident, but neither is it planned. Long ago, this entire basin lay under a shallow sea where shells, coral, and microscopic marine creatures built up layer upon layer of calcium carbonate. Over millions of years, those layers compressed into limestone. When the sea retreated, the limestone became vulnerable to the slow, persistent artistry of wind erosion. Here, wind didn't just sculpt in one direction. It swirled within the basin, polishing some parts smooth and carving others into grooves. The swan's neck was once part of a wider pillar, but softer streaks within the stone wore away more quickly, leaving the harder vein standing proud. Over time, the balance between neck and body narrowed into the elegant sweep. You see now a shape so fragile, it seems one strong gust might undo it. You approach carefully, noticing how shadows pool along its curves. The base of the body has shallow hollows that resemble the folds of wings, as if the bird had just tucked them close. Tiny ledges there collect wind-blown seeds and grains of sand. When you brush your hand along one hollow, the stone is unexpectedly cool, and grains of quartz sparkle faintly like dew. Standing this close, you start to imagine how such a shape might have appeared to early travelers. Perhaps they gave it a name, told stories of a swan turned to stone for guarding a sacred spring. Your own mind drifts to the thought, if this were your first time ever seeing a swan real or carved, how long would you stand in the quiet just to memorize it? The swan's elegance hides a truth. Limestone is relatively soft compared to igneous rock. It dissolves slowly in slightly acidic rainwater, the same process that carves caves underground. This means the swan is not eternal. One day its neck may collapse, breaking the illusion forever. In that way, it shares the fate of real swans whose beauty is fleeting. The basin amplifies sound in a curious way. When the wind gusts, it hums low like a deep cello string being brushed. That hum seems to settle into the swan's hollow curves, resonating faintly in your bones. You sit on a nearby rock listening, letting your breathing match the rhythm of the air. Above, a hawk circles once, its shadow sliding across the swan's pale body. For a heartbeat, the stone seems to stir, and you wonder if wind and light can make it feel alive. For just a moment, isn't that proof that even in stillness, the earth remembers movement? The sun dips further, bathing the swan in a soft amber glow. Its pale limestone catches the light like silk, the neck and head outlined in gentle fire. You take one last look before moving on, knowing you've seen something rare, a form so close to life that you'll carry its stillness long after the wind here has moved on to carve other shapes. The path out of the basin is narrow and slow, winding between low ridges of rock that catch the last light of the day. As you crest one final rise, the world ahead opens in a way that makes you pause. A broad plateau stretches to the horizon, and at its center towers the most astonishing form yet. It is the elephant. Not a playful suggestion of one, not a rough resemblance. This colossus of sandstone seems almost to breathe. Its head tilts slightly, ears spread wide like great sails, trunk curling downward toward the ground, where a small hollow suggests an ancient watering hole. Its skin is rough with ridges and pits, the result of countless storms, carving away softer minerals, leaving a textured surface that feels almost warm under your hand. The sheer scale is overwhelming. Standing near its front foot, you realize it rises nearly 6 stories high. The legs are thick, solid columns, supporting the head and trunk that jut forward in an impossible balance. Wind whistles faintly through narrow gaps between trunk and leg, a sound that's almost like the soft rumbling breath of a real elephant. Geologically, you know this is the work of differential erosion, where harder bands of sandstone have resisted the elements, while softer layers receded. The long, trunk-like projection was once part of a continuous wall, but wind and rain carved through most of it, leaving behind this improbable column that connects head to ground. Amazingly, the density of the stone varies in just such a way that it has withstood collapse, though one well-placed crack could change that forever. You step back, taking in the entire silhouette against the fading light. The ears, two flaring slabs of rock, are thin enough in places for sunlight to shine through glowing amber from within. You think of how an actual elephant's ears carry warmth and sound, and for a moment you imagine this stone giant using them to listen to the slow heartbeat of the desert. It's impossible not to feel small in its presence. The elephant seems timeless, yet you know time is its only sculptor. Millennia from now, the trunk will likely break away, the head crumble, the legs dissolve into isolated pillars. But tonight, in this moment, it stands complete, as if caught in mid-step across the ages. You let your gaze wander to the details, the faint wave-like patterns in the rock that reveal its origin as ancient seabed. The way lichens cling stubbornly to the shadier side, painting soft green stains. The faint mineral streaks like tears under its eyes. You wonder if early travelers crossing this plateau ever camped beneath its shelter, telling stories by firelight of a guardian elephant who watched over wanderers. The air cools quickly now. The last sunlight brushes the elephant's brow before slipping away entirely, leaving it a deep silhouette against a violet sky. The wind falls to a hush, as though even the desert itself is paying quiet respect. You sit on a low stone, the giant looming above, and let the silence settle over you. You think of all the shapes you've seen on this journey: fish owls, turtles, swans, each one a reminder that the earth is not a static thing, but a living gallery, constantly changing its art. This elephant, though, still is also in motion. Its change simply takes more time than you can measure in a lifetime. Your breath slows. The stars begin to bloom overhead, first a scattering, then a spill of silver. The plateau seems to hold them all, as if the giant's ears could catch their light. You lean back against the stone, eyes closing, letting the image of the elephant settle into memory, a companion for your dreams. And so here on the quiet plateau beneath the shadow of the stone elephant, your journey draws to a close. The air is cooler, now soft against your skin, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and distant rain. The great shape above you stands unmoving, but you feel its presence like a slow, deep heartbeat in the earth. In this stillness, time stretches out gentle and unhurried, wrapping you in its patient rhythm. You think of the countless years that have passed to bring this place into being, the oceans that once lay here, the winds that have sung across these plains, the storms that shaped every curve. Each stone along your path has held its own story, told in a language older than any word. And now that story mingles quietly with yours, as if the earth itself has found a place for you in its endless memory. The stars above are bright enough to paint pale glimmers on the elephant's broad brow. You imagine it standing here long after you've gone, keeping watch through nights and seasons, always listening to the slow songs of wind and time. The thought is strangely comforting, a reminder that some things, even in their change, can feel eternal in the moment you share with them. Your breathing deepens. The night seems to lean closer, whispering for you to rest. And perhaps now you can, knowing you've walked among giants, carved by nothing more than patience and the quiet work of the world. If you've enjoyed this journey, I'd be quietly grateful if you'd give this video a like or tap that subscribe button for more peaceful explorations with the Sleepy Scientist. It helps more than you might imagine. And before you drift off, I'd still love to know, where in the world are you listening? From what time it is there? Leave a comment if you're feeling cozy enough to share. It's always a quiet joy to see this sleepy little community ripple across time zones and continents. Good night.